But Oz has something he wanted to talk to us about that has been on his mind lately, and something a bit more serious that people might have had to deal with themselves. So he really wanted to talk to us about it and get our thoughts and share with our audience. So Oz, why don't you go ahead?
All right. So this is going to be a hard segment, so I apologize if I make anyone, especially you, emotional. One of my best friends had a very sudden and unexpected stroke during the holidays, and he passed away. His name was Ace. He was a fellow gamer at my table, and at least once a week for the past 7 years, I would spend hours with Ace playing a board game or an RPG over drinks and food delivery. And if it wasn't for tabletop gaming, I don't think our friendship would have grown to where he became chosen family. And I feel like I have it somewhat easier because some of my friends at the table have known him for basically their entire lives. But he was witty, he was vivacious and direct. He brought so much joy and hilarity and positivity to our table. And I smile every time I think about him doing anything, even the underhanded knife twists. And not having him there feels like such a void. It's like an ace shaped hole sitting in a chair, not fiddling with every die on the table, not collecting every single item card and spell until he has like 30 different options and combos in front of him. Um, but it's not like we never played without him. There were plenty of nights where, he was working and we got together anyway and had a great time without him. And we certainly didn't feel this emptiness. But the promise of having him at the table in the future, that made not having him at the table perfectly fine. But that's gone now. And I want to talk about what we do when a good friend, a staple at your gaming table, is lost. And before we go into it any deeper, I'm not a mental health professional. None of us are. I'm just sharing my experiences, hoping that we can help give a perspective to anyone who has the misfortune of going through this. But if this doesn't help, if this is still too much for you, there is no shame in seeking professionals, counsel, or support groups to guide you. I don't have the answers really. I'm still going through it. So I'm just opening up the floor for us to all talk about it. The first thing I want to discuss is, after some time, people are going to want to start getting together again. Gaming is an escape, but grieving is different for everyone. And how soon we can each return to the table is going to vary. Even playing a one-off game can be difficult. And I think gaming can feel like you're minimizing the person's passing and signaling that your grieving's done when it might not be. So I think there's two sides of this to explore. If you're ready to return to the table, but your friends are not, or if your friends are ready to return to the table, but you are not. How do we respectfully approach these situations so that everyone is supporting each other the best they can?
Have
What do
any
y'all
of
think?
you guys? I've personally never had this experience before, and I would like to go ahead and start by saying thank you very much for being willing to share this with us, Oz. But has anybody else had this experience? So I'm really curious.
I, no, not as far as death. No,
Mm-hmm.
I've had something akin to this, right, where I've grieved somebody not being at my table anymore, but it was the end of a friendship instead of a death, which brings a lot of more, I think, more complex, if a little bit less intense emotions with it.
Mm.
But no, I can't say that I have.
Yeah, my friend Dave Hummel. I gamed with him a bunch over the years. Lots of Shadowrun and D&D and other stuff. We've had a lot of good times together, and he's one of those people where like I don't know why we got along because we were like brothers and really liked and loved each other, but we also really didn't get along in a lot of times too. And it was a really interesting dynamic that I never had with anybody else. He moved away a few years before he got pancreatic cancer and passed away, so I don't really have the experience of having him being, sort of torn out of our gaming group by death. He had already sort of moved on to a different area. But that, I guess, is the closest experience that I have to that. And yeah, I don't really, it doesn't really help with
Mm-hmm.
insight for what you do about getting back together because
Well, yeah.
that was in the past already.
Right.
So it seems to me like sort of central to the question, because the question you asked was how do you respectfully approach everyone and supporting each other and all of the people that are all going through this loss together at the same time, and mentioning grief, I think, is important because that's all part of that grief process, right? And I think part of it is understanding. This is me speculating, of course. I definitely everyone's experiences. I've never gone through it before, but from I do understand that everybody grieves differently, and I think for some people, like, do you have anybody who really feels right now that that's what they should be doing? Is they should be getting back, getting out there, continuing this campaign or continuing gaming, and honoring Ace's memory in that way. Like some of you do feel that way.
Yeah. I can say I've already gone back to the gaming table. My husband played, but then had a hard time
Sure.
really continuing. He was like, I don't know if I'm up for this. I have another friend who is fairly confident, actually probably very confident, that she can't continue our current tabletop RPG campaign. Which we were going to have a finale. Yeah.
Because the memory is too difficult. Like
And
knowing that he was part of that, and it just the memory
that actually would resonate with me. I don't like, and I'm not even, this isn't the same thing, but Cliff and I are in a game with someone who recently lost their spouse, and I wasn't sure that they would want to continue to play. But so I sort of thought to myself, like, okay, like this is the wrap up, right? Like maybe we can sort of do a little RP to, like, end the character arcs and then move on to something. But their response was, no, I want to do this, right? Like they seem to think about it in terms of, like, I need this for me. And so I think it's, well, anyway, it wasn't my heartbreak. But I think being sensitive to them and what they needed, right? And not assuming, again, I did assume that they probably just didn't want to play anymore, but that was wrong, right? Because everybody grieves differently, and some people, I wouldn't say need to play, but like that can be a healing thing for them instead of a hurtful memory. So yeah, I think it's going to depend on the person. And if nobody wanted to play it anymore, if it was too hard, I would find a respectful way to end the campaign, like sort of wrap up the storylines in a way that was honoring to Ace, and then try to get together still and just play a different game.
I think also when we talk about gaming and role-playing games as being something of an escape and as being escapist, and while I think that's certainly true, I think it's only just part of it, because another part of gaming is not an escape, but a sort of a coming together with some people to have a shared experience. And I think that can be incredibly supportive in the right circumstances. But if, say, someone like, as you described, your husband's experience was that it was just painful to return to that in that context, then it's probably better to just, have them take whatever space they need to, or maybe even not even approach the same game again if that's what it's going to be. But I would say if it were me passing away, my wishes would be that that people get back to gaming as soon as they want to, but don't feel like they have to continue the same thing on my behalf or in memory of me. But I think it would be really cool if my characters lived on and people did things with them. They existed as NPCs or adventure arc inspirations. Like that would be like me getting to game with people posthumously in a non-metaphysical context.
That is absolutely something I want to touch on next. But before I get into that, to kind of add on to the giving of space, I think it's probably important to find, I guess, a person who is okay enough to want to return to the table, and then just have them kind of be the, hey, whenever anyone's comfortable, message me, and then we'll set up time. So like that we're not like flaunting, like we're getting together for gaming, and if someone in the group isn't ready, to not feel like they're missing out or like they have to speed up their grieving process. So I think just being able to kind of do that off to the side and just but openly saying like we're here to support you whenever you're ready to return. I think that's the most important approach to it.
Yeah,
But
the
also-
example Opti gave about one of our players had a spouse that passed away. We just basically put everything up to them. It was up to them when or if we continued, and we waited and we were there for them, but didn't really push anything and just let them set the pace.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's a campaign, for sure, like that campaign has to be put on hold until there's a willingness for everybody. But if you're just getting together to do like a one-off, then just to join and hang out and just do something. Yeah.
But also,
Absolutely.
understanding that grief is a process and that
Mhm.
everybody goes through that process in different ways. And the reason I say that is because I can easily imagine a situation where somebody's ready to get back in and start gaming and just and that's what they want to do. That's part of the process, but they're still in the process of grief. And there may be times when something happens and they break down and
Yeah.
in the middle of a gaming session, and everyone understanding that that's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's let it happen. And if you want to continue, let's do that. If you don't want to continue at that moment, let's do that. There was one thing, I had a friend not too long ago who lost a parent, and this makes me think of that because a lot of times we assume that people just don't want to talk about it and they don't want to be around it and they just want to forget about it. But I remember this person telling me that everybody around them didn't want to assume that they didn't want to talk about it when their parent dying is all they wanted to talk about. Like and they like people coming to them and talking to them about it and letting them express their feelings and talking about it was all that they wanted to do. And not everybody's like that. So just being sensitive and aware, I guess, and knowing.
Available and just letting the person know, like, we're free to talk about whatever it is that's gonna help. But going back to Cliff's point about characters, right? So especially with tabletop campaigns, right? The character that your friend created can be a very painful reminder that they're not there anymore to play them. But they're also a beloved personality, and that means so much to the characters as well as to the players. So how do you think game masters should handle their treatment in a currently ongoing campaign?
That sounds like that. I mean, this is obviously the reason you're bringing it up. That sounds like a really hard question to answer.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I don't know, on a case by case basis.
Well, so one thing that I'm thinking, because I'm a game master in one of them.
Yeah, I was about to ask, what is your instinct? What are you feeling right now?
My first instinct is I would first communicate with all of my players and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. I want the characters to still be around. They're obviously not going to be on adventures with you, but they will be there as a resource, as support, as a cheerleader, and as a quest giver, even, and potentially even a white knight, that's kind of just shows up out of nowhere. But I wanted to make sure that all of my players are going to be okay with that it honors them properly, that they're also going to be okay with me, putting their piece down on the map and just showing up, right? And that it won't, that any tears that happen are going to be happy tears and not like, oh no.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Yeah, that's my instinct. But I have an easier time at it because it's D&D. My husband's Star Wars campaign was still ongoing. We were actually one final session before we were done with it. And he's an active participant in that. He's our pilot, right? So we're going to not have a pilot.
Right, I see what you're saying. So it's much harder to just let Ace's character fade into the back, like to just be removed in that situation, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. And something that he had mentioned, and speaking of Star Wars, that I think is kind of like an apt comparison, is when Carrie Fisher died, right? And everybody, associates everybody who grew up with Star Wars, right? Carrie Fisher and Leia, all of that was such a big, big deal when she was suddenly taken from us. And that the movies were able to continue her legacy for a couple of extra films before they finally gave her the appropriate send off. That also got me thinking of, is it appropriate to do a send off like that, like some kind of finale, especially if it's death of a character whose player has passed away? And I don't know, like, are they always, is that approachable? Is that something that you should even do? Or should they just always be like, look, this character is sacrosanct. They are not going anywhere. They will always be there for you. I
wonder if there's a way to have a character, and I'm speaking generically, but obviously there's context, but to have the character to have a special session where you just find a way to allow the character to just like ride off into the sunset, so to speak, and but knowing that everybody who's participating is doing this for almost like a ceremonial, like a funeral in a sense, a way to honor that person, as it's all for all of you together to be able to as part of that process. I don't know
if the group is
of course,
okay
only
with
if
that,
the group
right?
is okay.
If the four of us were in a game and one of us passed, I think if I weren't the one that passed, I think what I would suggest would be to throw out ideas and to come to consensus. Like, what would be the most honoring thing? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And that might be because, frankly, it's not for the person who's passed. It's for the people who remain.
Right.
And so if we could all come to an agreement with something that we knew would honor our friend, and whether it's allowing their character to pass along with them so that our characters can honor them the way that we're honoring our friend, or whether it's, immortalizing them in the world, I think that is all incredibly contextual. But I think whatever decision we would make, we wouldn't do it if somebody was going to feel that wasn't a good choice for them.
We'd have to make the decision together. Yeah.
But I think we talk a lot about collaborative storytelling here, right? Like the importance of working together to tell a story. And I think, like you said, this is for the players, not for the character. And this isn't a question of like giving the GM room to be like the most clever and figure out a way to make it work. This needs to be something that everyone at the table is going to be happy with, that they get to kind of collaborate on what this person's fate is going to be, and what the level of interaction that they're going to be moving forward is. So I think that's a great suggestion.
If everybody at the table agrees that the way that you handle it is honoring, then it is honoring. You are the ones who get to make that call. So
and it's hard. It'll be hard.
Absolutely.
And but all right, well, I think it's time we start closing out this segment, but I want to end on a final note. And this is something that helped me personally reach the acceptance stage of grief. And it might not help you, and that's okay, but here goes. My best advice is to take the things that you admired the most about how your friend played games, the positive energy that they brought, and what you've learned about gaming and being a better person by just being in their presence, and you yourself bring that to the table. Bring the joy that they've brought you so that it's you keeping their spirit alive. so that they can keep bringing you joy, so that they're no longer a void at the table, but a presence that will always be cherished and valued. And they can't do the things that made you smile themselves anymore. So you've got to do it for them. Because if it were up to them, they'd be there doing it in the way that you all thought that they would be. So I'm dedicating the segment to my friend Ace. I hope that in his memory, we've been able to help you all navigate through some really tough waters. I'm putting a link to a GoFundMe in the description below, which will go directly to parents who he was taking care of. They've almost reached a $40,000 goal, which hopefully gives you some sense of how much and how many people loved him. So thank you, Ace, for everything. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. We are live every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern with plenty of tabletop-related topics, usually more upbeat. So you are always welcome to join us in our live chat. Also consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Shadowcasters Network to support the creation of our content. And finally, give your friends a big hug or an e-hug. Thank you for going through this one with me. If you have anything you'd like to add from your own experience, please leave a comment below, because you never know who you might help. Take care.